The village of Mwangaza lay nestled between the rolling hills and dense forests, a place where time seemed to hold its breath and ancient secrets whispered through the rustling leaves. This was a land where the past was never truly gone, where old magic lingered in the shadows and breathed life into the very earth beneath the villagers' feet. Mwangaza was a place where the winds carried the echoes of forgotten spells, and the air shimmered with unseen forces that had watched over the village for centuries. The people of Mwangaza lived closely with nature, respecting the spirits of the land and the lessons passed down from ancestors whose voices seemed to linger like a quiet hum beneath the surface of everyday life. In the heart of this village lived a girl named Zuri, whose name meant beautiful in the language of her people, though her beauty was more than skin deep. Zuri was gentle and kind, a soul as soft and luminous as the first light of dawn. She moved through the village like a breeze, touching lives with warmth and a quiet strength that seemed to grow stronger with every smile she shared. Her laughter was like a melody, and the children adored her, gathering eagerly at her side whenever she played or told stories beneath the sprawling baobab tree. To the villagers, Zuri was a beacon of hope, a living reminder of the goodness that still thrived in the world. Zuri's mother, Asha, was the heart of the village's small community. She was known far and wide not only for her skill in healing herbs and remedies but for her fierce love for her daughter. Together they shared a bond forged in tenderness and quiet strength. Asha had raised Zuri with stories of the spirits that danced among the trees and the ancient magic that watched over their land. Before she passed, she gave Zuri a small doll, an exquisite little figure carved from dark wood and wrapped in bright cloth, imbued with blessings and protection. The doll was more than a toy, it was a symbol of the love between mother and daughter, a talisman against the hardships the girl would someday face. But fate can be cruel, and the light in Zuri's world flickered and dimmed when her mother suddenly fell ill and passed away. The village mourned with her, and the once vibrant home now felt heavy with silence. Grief settled over Zuri's heart like a thick fog, and in the days after Asha's death, the girl found herself adrift, clutching the doll close as though it might somehow keep her mother's spirit near. Into this grief stepped the woman who would change Zuri's life forever, her stepmother, Marembi. Unlike the warm kindness that had filled Zuri's early years, Marembi brought a coldness that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. She was jealous of the love that lingered around Zuri like a protective cloak, and bitter about the attention the villagers still gave the girl despite her mother's passing. Marembi's eyes held a hardness that made Zuri's heart ache, and her voice was sharp when she spoke. She whispered dark things behind closed doors, and the children who once adored Zuri now looked at her with a mixture of fear and pity, and the fiercest venom. It wasn't long before Marembi made a cruel move to break the last ties that bound Zuri to her mother's memory. She took the precious doll, the last gift from Asha, and with a cold, calculating hand, carried it far from the village. Deep in the forest lay a pit, rumored to be the resting place of snakes that no one dared disturb. It was a place of danger and dread, a dark secret whispered about but never spoken aloud. There, in the snake pit, Marembi buried the doll, hiding it beneath earth and venomous coils. She believed that by destroying the doll, she could crush the spirit of the girl and erase the love that surrounded her. For Zuri, the loss was like a fresh wound that throbbed in the silence of her nights. She felt the absence of the doll as a hollow ache in her chest, a pain that words could not express. Yet even as sorrow threatened to consume her, a small flame of hope flickered in her heart. She whispered prayers into the dark, calling out to the spirit she believed lived within the doll, begging it to remain close and protect her through the coming storms. Though she was surrounded by shadows and cruelty, Zuri clung to the belief that the love her mother had woven into that wooden figure could never truly be broken. Her nights became restless, haunted by dreams where the doll was trapped beneath the slithering bodies of snakes, cold and alone, yet somehow still calling to her. The village, too, seemed to sense a change in the air. An unease settled like a slow fog, as if the very earth held its breath, waiting for something to shift. Old women muttered of bad omens, and children shied away from the dark woods near the snake pit. The wind itself seemed heavier, carrying whispers of a power long hidden but awakening. Mwangaza was no longer the safe haven it once had been. The threads of old magic and new darkness were beginning to intertwine, weaving a story that would change everything. Despite the heaviness around her, Zuri moved through her days with a quiet determination, her spirit refusing to break even as the weight of loss pressed down on her. She found small moments of solace in the kindness of the village children who still believed in her, and in the memories of her mother's love that fluttered like a gentle breeze through her heart. The doll may have been buried deep beneath venomous coils, but Zuri's hope was a seed that would not wither, even in the darkest soil. And somewhere beneath the surface, in the heart of the snake pit, a silent promise stirred. A promise that power could come from pain, and that love could outlast Eve. Under the cloak of night, Zuri lay restless, her mind haunted by dreams that felt more like warnings than mere figments of sleep. In these dreams, the doll, her precious talisman and last gift from her mother, was trapped deep within the snake pit, surrounded by slithering, gleaming bodies. The snakes writhed and twisted, their scales catching the pale moonlight, but there was a chill in the air that seemed to freeze the very heart of the pit. The doll sat cold and afraid, its wooden face blank yet somehow pleading, as if calling out to her across the dark divide. The fear and helplessness in those dreams tugged at Zuri's soul, urging her to find a way to reach what was lost. Each night, the visions grew more vivid, painting scenes of the pit not just as a place of danger but as a prison where her mother's love was trapped and waiting for rescue. The weight of the dreams bore heavily upon her chest, compelling her to act, despite the dangers whispered among the villagers about the pit's venomous residents. But Zuri was no longer the frightened girl cowering in shadow. The loss of her mother and the cruel deeds of her stepmother had ignited something fierce and brave inside her. On one particularly bright night, when the silver light of the full moon bathed Mwangaza in a surreal glow, Zuri slipped quietly from her home. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination as she made her way toward the snake pit, its mouth gaping like a dark wound in the earth near the forest's edge. The village was silent save for the distant calls of night birds and the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Approaching the pit, Zuri knelt at its edge, the cold earth beneath her knees grounding her trembling body. She whispered her prayers softly, calling the doll's name with a voice that wavered yet carried the steady hope of a heart that refused to surrender. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of earth and something older. Ancient power coiled beneath the surface like the snakes themselves. Then, something extraordinary happened. The snakes began to stir, not with aggression but with a strange calm. Instead of striking or retreating, they coiled slowly, almost reverently around the pit's edge. Their eyes, dark and unblinking, seemed to watch Zuri with a curious intelligence, as if they understood her pain and listened to the sorrow threaded through her words. The cold fear that had always gripped her at the thought of the pit melted away, replaced by a warmth that radiated from within. It was as though the snakes recognized her not as a threat, but as a bearer of something sacred. Tentatively, Zuri reached out her hands, trembling as they hovered above the slithering forms. A single snake lifted its head and brushed its smooth, cool body against her fingers, a gentle touch that sent a shiver of awe through her veins. The sensation was unlike anything she had known, neither painful nor frightening, but filled with a quiet power that whispered promises of protection and strength. The villagers soon began to murmur about the strange bond Zuri seemed to share with the deadly snakes. At the market, hushed conversations buzzed in corners, casting wary glances toward the girl who had lost so much yet walked with a new, unexplainable confidence. Some called it a curse, a sign that the spirits had turned dark eyes upon the village. Others whispered of old magic awakening, something powerful and unpredictable, bound to Zuri in ways they could not understand. Marembi, the stepmother, grew increasingly fearful as the rumors spread like wildfire. The fire of her jealousy was stoked by the growing whispers, and her nights were haunted by restless dreams filled with writhing snakes and flickering shadows. She saw the snakes not as protectors but as harbingers of doom, a curse that could unravel all she had fought to control. Her anger deepened into paranoia, and her eyes narrowed whenever she looked upon Zuri, whom she now saw not as a stepdaughter but as a threat to her very existence. Determined to break whatever bond she suspected, Marembi began to seek out the village elders, speaking in urgent tones about the dangers of old magic and the need to cleanse the house and the girl herself. Yet the elders, wise in the ways of the land and its ancient spirits, listened cautiously. Some recognized the signs as a turning point, an awakening that could not be stopped but only guided. The village stood at a crossroads between fear and hope, tradition and change. Meanwhile, Zuri continued her secret visits to the pit, each night feeling the protective presence of the snakes grow stronger around her. She wrapped her arms around the edge of the pit, the rough bark of the earth grounding her as she whispered words her mother had taught her, prayers and songs that reached beyond the visible world. The warmth she felt was no longer just a sensation, it was a promise. The snakes slept in her arms not as enemies but as guardians, and in their silent watchfulness, Zuri found a wellspring of courage that no cruelty could diminish. The darkness that had once threatened to consume her was being transformed, turned inside out by the ancient magic weaving its way through the village once more. Zuri was no longer just a lost child of grief, She was becoming something new, something powerful. And beneath the moon's gentle gaze, where earth met sky, the snake pit's secret was unfolding. A secret that would challenge the fears of the village and awaken the strength buried deep within the heart of a girl who refused to be broken. In the days that followed, the atmosphere inside Zuri's home grew thick with a heavy silence. A silence that weighed on her chest like a stone and suffocated the light she so desperately sought. The stepmother, Mirembe, driven by a venomous blend of jealousy and fear, tightened her grip on the household with ruthless determination. She forbade Zuri from leaving the house, locking every door and shuttering every window as if to imprison not just the girl, but the very spirit that threatened to rise within her. Each morning, the heavy wooden bolts would be fastened with a loud clang, the iron locks securing Zuri's world into a cage of shadows and isolation. No longer allowed to wander the village paths or play with the children who once adored her, Zuri found herself confined within the cold, stifling walls of a home that had become a prison. The laughter that once filled the air around her was replaced by silence, broken only by the creaking of old floorboards and the harsh footsteps of her stepmother as she patrolled the house like a dark sentinel. But even in this harsh new reality, the bond that had begun to form between Zuri and the snakes of the pit refused to be severed. When night fell and the world outside slipped into dreams, the snakes, silent, graceful and mysterious, would slither through the smallest cracks and crevices in her room. They came without sound, their smooth bodies gliding over the wooden floor and curling gently around her feet and hands as she lay sleeping. Their presence was a silent vigil, a protective embrace that comforted her in the darkest hours. Zuri felt the snake's warmth against her skin, a strange reassurance that reached deep into her soul. Their cool scales were like a shield against the coldness of her stepmother's cruelty. As she drifted between wakefulness and sleep, the snakes whispered to her, not in words but in feelings and images carried on the night wind. They shared ancient secrets of strength, resilience, and survival, weaving stories that echoed from the depths of the earth and the heights of the sky. In her dreams, Zuri saw herself transformed, not as a helpless girl trapped by circumstance, but as a fierce spirit born of the earth and air, resilient as the snakes coiled around her. She learned to move with silent grace, to endure the sharpest pain without breaking, and to find power in stillness. These night visions filled her with a growing determination to reclaim her life, no matter the price. Word of Zuri's strange connection spread quietly beyond the walls of the house, carried by whispers on the wind and glances exchanged in the marketplace. The villagers' awe mingled with fear, as old superstitions about snakes and spirits stirred unease. Some saw Zuri as blessed, touched by the ancient magic of the land. Others saw her as cursed, a harbinger of trouble. Mirembe's envy festered as the rumors grew. Her fear turned to obsession, and she sought counsel from a healer reputed to understand the mysteries of magic and the spirits of the earth. The healer, an elderly woman with eyes like polished stones, listened carefully to Mirembe's frantic pleas to sever the bond between Zuri and the snakes. With a grave voice, the healer warned that to break such a bond would invite ruin not only upon Zuri but upon the entire household, and perhaps the village itself. The snakes were protectors, guardians of an ancient power that, once awakened, could not be easily undone. Attempting to force the bond apart could unleash forces far darker and more destructive than Mirembe dared to imagine. But the stepmother's heart was hardened by bitterness and envy. The warning did little to quell the storm within her. Instead, it fueled her rage and deepened her resolve to control the girl and extinguish whatever flicker of power she possessed. Each day Mirembe's actions became harsher, her threats more venomous, as she sought to crush the spirit that defied her. Yet, in the quiet moments before dawn, as the village lay wrapped in slumber and the first light brushed the horizon, Zuri found solace in the silent companionship of the snakes curled protectively around her. Their presence was a testament to a bond forged in darkness and strengthened by hope, a bond that whispered of a future where pain could be transformed into power, and silence could give way to a voice that would never be silenced again. The days grew darker in Mwangaza, not just because the sun's warmth was stolen by a relentless drought, but because the shadows cast by fear and misunderstanding lengthened in the hearts of its people. Zuri's health, once vibrant and full of light, began to wane. Her cheeks lost their rosy glow, her eyes dimmed with a quiet fatigue, and her once steady breath came in shallow, uneven waves. The villagers watched with growing unease, their whispers turning into harsh accusations. They said the snake spirit within her was a curse, a dark omen that had fallen upon the village like a cloud. The earth itself seemed to mourn. The fields that had once yielded generous harvests now cracked and crumbled under the cruel heat. Corn stalks wilted, leaves curled and browned, and the wells that had quenched the thirst of generations ran dry. The river, the village's lifeblood, shriveled to a mere trickle. Mwangaza was gripped by desperation, and the people's hope dried alongside their crops. In this time of suffering, Mirembe, the stepmother, grew more ruthless. Her bitterness twisted into fierce cruelty, a desperate attempt to control what she could no longer understand. She blamed Zuri not only for her own waning health but for the drought itself, whispering venomous threats that the girl was a blight upon the village. She demanded, with a cold and hard voice, that Zuri be cast out, banished from the only home she had left. But the snakes, loyal and fearless, refused to let this happen. As the villagers' fear and anger grew, the serpents became bolder, slipping through the shadows to the edges of the village where they slithered silently, guarding the path to Zuri's humble hut. Their presence was a silent shield against intruders, a living barrier woven from scales and shadows. One evening when a group of villagers, armed with torches and pitchforks, approached the hut intending to force Zuri out, they were met with a surprising sight. The snakes, coiling and flickering tongues in the firelight, formed a silent circle that held the intruders at bay. The villagers hesitated, their bravado faltering under the calm, watchful eyes of the creatures they had feared for so long. In the quiet that followed, Zuri found new strength stirring within her. Though her body was weak, her spirit burned brighter than ever. She began to teach the village children about the snakes, not as monsters to be feared, but as ancient guardians who protected life and balance. Under the shade of a dying baobab tree, she shared stories of the snakes' wisdom, their role in the cycle of the earth, and the silent power they held. The children listened with wide eyes, their fears slowly giving way to curiosity and wonder. They reached out trembling hands to touch the snakes when they appeared near the village's edge, feeling the cool smoothness of their scales and sensing the gentle pulse of life beneath. They learned to see the snakes as symbols of resilience, strength, and transformation. Slowly, the villagers' whispered curses began to change. The word curse faded and was replaced by murmurs of awe and hope. Some elders spoke cautiously of blessings hidden in the drought, of a test from the spirits that demanded respect and understanding. The fear that had clouded their hearts lifted bit by bit, replaced by a cautious reverence for the bond between Zuri and the serpents. As the drought dragged on, something shifted in the village of Mwangaza. The air grew thick not just with dust and heat, but with a fragile promise, that even in the harshest trials there could be renewal. And at the center of this change stood a girl who had been broken by cruelty but was rising, like the snakes curled protectively around her, to become a guardian herself. Under the silver glow of the full moon, the village of Mwangaza was cloaked in an eerie stillness, broken only by the whispering wind that carried secrets through the trees. It was a night unlike any other, a night when the old magic stirred in the air, calling out to those willing to listen. For Zuri, this night was a turning point, a moment when the whispered lessons of her serpentine guardians would come alive in a dance of power and transformation. In the quiet solitude of her hut, Zuri prepared herself. Her bare feet pressed gently into the cool earth, the skin on her arms prickling with anticipation. The snakes that had become her constant companions curled around her ankles, their bodies warm and pulsing with an ancient rhythm. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her and the stirring of the old magic within her veins. The dance began, not with grand gestures, but with a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to flow from the very core of her being. Each step was a whisper, each turn a conversation with the wind and the shadows. Her arms rose and fell like the sway of the river, her body twisting in harmony with the song only she could hear. It was a dance taught to her not by human hands but by the serpents themselves, through dreams that wrapped around her sleep like silken threads, revealing ancient patterns etched in scales and moonlight. As she danced, the snakes responded. One by one they uncoiled, rising from the earth like ribbons of shadow and light. Their scales shimmered under the moon, reflecting silver and sapphire hues that flickered like stars caught in a midnight sky. They circled her, weaving a living tapestry of movement and magic, their bodies undulating in time with the rhythm of her heart. Word of the dance spread quickly, carried on the wind to the ears of the villagers. Drawn by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and awe, they gathered silently at the edges of the clearing where Zuri performed. Men and women stood in clusters, their eyes wide, breaths held in reverent suspense. The children, too, watched with wonder, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. Amid the crowd, Mirembe, the stepmother, seethed with fury. She had heard of the gathering and rushed to stop the ritual, her voice sharp with commands and threats. But as she approached, the magic in the air thickened like a living shield, and the snakes hissed a warning that made even her heart tremble. She found herself powerless against the bond between Zuri and the serpents, a connection forged through pain, resilience, and ancient secrets. Zuri's dance grew stronger, her movements more assured, as if the energy of the snakes flowed directly through her veins. The circle of serpents tightened, their bodies touching hers in a silent, unbreakable embrace. The air around them shimmered with a palpable power, a fusion of spirit and scale, of girl and guardian, that transcended the fears and doubts of the villagers. In that moment, the village of Mwangaza witnessed the birth of a new legend. Zuri was no longer just a girl marked by cruelty and loss. She was chosen by the old magic, a living bridge between the human world and the ancient forces that whispered in the shadows. The fear that had once gripped the hearts of the people began to melt, replaced by a growing reverence for the strength and grace that radiated from her. As the dance reached its crescendo, the moonlight bathed the clearing in a luminous glow, and the serpent's scales sparkled like the stars themselves had descended to join the celebration. Zuri's spirit soared, lifted by the power of the dance and the unwavering loyalty of her snake guardians. The bond they shared was more than magic, it was a promise of protection, transformation, and hope. When the dance finally ended, silence hung heavy in the air. The villagers slowly began to applaud, their claps tentative at first but growing louder, echoing across the night like thunder rolling over the hills. Even Mirembe, though begrudgingly, could not deny the change she saw in Zuri, a girl no longer broken but whole and radiant, standing tall with the strength of the serpents woven into her soul. From that night forward, the dance of serpents became a symbol of resilience and renewal in Mwangaza. It reminded the people that even in the darkest times, there was a power that could not be crushed, a power that rose from the earth, wrapped in scales and song, ready to guide those brave enough to embrace it. And at the center of it all stood Zuri, the girl who had turned thorns into strength, darkness into light, and fear into a dance that would echo through generations. The parched earth of Mwangaza cracked open like a fragile shell, longing for the touch of rain that had eluded it for so long. 4 months, the village had suffered beneath a relentless drought. Fields lay barren, rivers shriveled to mere trickles, and the people's faces were etched with worry and despair. Yet, on one fateful morning, the heavens finally relented. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, heavy with promise, and the first drops of rain fell like whispered blessings upon the thirsty land. As the rain deepened, rivers swelled and cascaded through the village, washing away the dust and replenishing the soil's hunger. Crops, once wilted and gray, began to stand tall again, their leaves reaching skyward in gratitude. The villagers rejoiced, their voices rising in songs of thanks and celebration. It was a turning point, a moment that marked the end of suffering and the beginning of renewal. At the heart of this transformation was Zuri, whose bond with the serpents had grown ever stronger. The snakes that once slithered quietly around her home now stood as vigilant protectors of the village. They patrolled the edges of Mwangaza, their eyes sharp and unyielding, warding off thieves who sought to steal from the hungry and wild beasts that prowled too close to the huts. Their presence was both a warning and a comfort, a living shield that guarded the people day and night. One afternoon, as Zuri wandered near the old snake pit where her journey had begun, she stumbled upon something remarkable. Hidden beneath the tangled vines and soft earth, her treasured doll lay nestled, but it was no longer the fragile toy she had once known. The doll had transformed, its surface gleaming with scales that shimmered in the sunlight like the finest jewels. It radiated a strange, powerful warmth, a pulse of life and magic that only Zuri could feel. This was no ordinary doll. It had been imbued with the spirit of the serpents, a living emblem of the ancient power that had claimed her as its own. Word spread quickly, and soon the village elders convened to honor Zuri in a ceremony unlike any before. They gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree, a symbol of strength and endurance, where the air thrummed with anticipation. The ritual blended old traditions with a newfound respect for the magic that had shaped Zuri's destiny. Elders chanted prayers and blessings, calling upon the spirits of earth and sky, while the snakes coiled gracefully around the ceremony's perimeter, silent sentinels of this sacred moment. At the ceremony's peak, Zuri was crowned the Snake Queen, a title that carried both honor and responsibility. A circlet woven from braided reeds, studded with tiny serpent motifs, was placed upon her head. It symbolized her connection to the serpents, her role as protector and healer, and her new place as a leader among her people. The villagers cheered, their voices rising in unison, celebrating not just a girl's triumph over cruelty but the emergence of a guardian who would guide them into a future filled with hope. Meanwhile, Mirembe, the stepmother, watched from the shadows with a sinking heart. Her power, once unchallenged within the household, was now overshadowed by the growing reverence for Zuri. The villagers turned to the Snake Queen for guidance and healing, seeking her wisdom to navigate the challenges of the changing world. The stepmother's bitterness deepened, but her influence waned like the dying embers of a fading fire. Despite the trials and darkness she had endured, Zuri embraced her destiny with unwavering courage. She understood that her path was no longer just her own, it was intertwined with the lives and futures of all who called Mwangaza home. With the strength of the serpents flowing through her and the legacy of her mother's love in her heart, she stepped forward to lead, protect, and heal. The rain continued to fall softly, washing over the village in gentle waves. It was a new beginning, a gift from the Snake Queen, a promise that even in the face of hardship, life could bloom again. And as the villagers looked to Zuri, they saw not just a girl transformed by magic but a beacon of resilience and hope, shining bright beneath the endless sky. The first light of dawn spilled softly over Mwangaza, casting long golden beams that danced through the leaves and warmed the earth. The village was alive with renewed energy, the fields were lush and green, the rivers sang as they flowed, and the air was thick with the sweet scent of blossoms and hope. This transformation was no miracle born of chance. It was the fruit of a deep ancient magic that had chosen Zuri as its bearer. Word had spread far and wide that the drought had ended and that the snakes, once feared, had become the village's guardians. With every step Zuri took, the villagers saw not just the girl who had endured cruelty, but a leader who had transformed pain into power. Yet amid this blossoming harmony, one heart remained shadowed, Mirembe, the stepmother, who had watched from afar with a mixture of resentment and awe. Zuri knew that for the village's peace to be truly complete, she had to face this final barrier, her stepmother. It was not an easy decision, but Zuri's heart held a profound understanding. True healing required facing the past even when it was painful. One morning she sent word for Mirembe to come to the village square, where the community had gathered for a celebration of renewal. The stepmother arrived, her steps hesitant and her eyes downcast, the weight of her past cruelty etched deeply on her face. The villagers watched in silence, some with suspicion, others with hope. Zuri stepped forward, her presence calm yet commanding. She greeted Mirembe not with anger, but with a gentle invitation. "Come and see what the village has become," Zuri said softly. "See what can grow when pain is transformed into strength." Together they walked through the village. Mirembe saw the vibrant crops swaying in the breeze, the children playing freely beneath the watchful eyes of the serpents, and the elders smiling with a newfound respect. She noticed how the once dreaded snakes moved like protectors rather than threats, their scales shimmering in the sunlight like living jewels. The stepmother's heart trembled with a mixture of fear, regret, and something else, an unfamiliar stirring of humility. As they reached the ancient baobab tree, where Zuri had been crowned the Snake Queen, the stepmother finally spoke. Her voice was shaky, burdened by the weight of years. "Zuri, I was blinded by envy and bitterness. I hurt you in ways I cannot undo. I feared the power you held, but I now see that it is not power for destruction but for life. I confess my cruelty and I am sorry." The village held its breath as Zuri looked into Mirembe's eyes, searching for truth. Forgiveness was a powerful gift, but it was not given lightly. "I forgive you," Zuri said quietly, "but only if you honor the snakes and respect the harmony we have built. If you seek redemption, you must walk the path of healing with us." Mirembe nodded, tears tracing lines down her worn face. Her journey had only just begun, a slow, painful process of rebuilding trust and making amends. The villagers, too, understood that peace was fragile and required vigilance, compassion, and strength. In the days that followed, Mirembe worked alongside Zuri and the villagers, learning the old rituals, caring for the snakes, and helping restore the land. Though the memory of past pain lingered like shadows at dusk, it served as a reminder of the cost of cruelty and the power of mercy. Through this transformation, Mirembe found a new purpose, and the village of Mwangaza embraced a future where old wounds could heal and new life could flourish. As the sun set, painting the sky with hues of pink and amber, Zuri stood beneath the baobab tree, feeling the gentle brush of the wind, the breath of the serpents and the spirit of the village. She knew that the road ahead would have challenges but also promise. Together they had stepped into the light, and nothing could dim their newfound strength. Zuri's story spread far beyond the boundaries of Mwangaza, carried on the wind like a timeless song that echoed through valleys, over mountains and across the vast plains. It became a legend not simply about a girl and her connection to serpents, but a powerful narrative of resilience, love, and the extraordinary strength found in unexpected places. From humble beginnings shadowed by sorrow and cruelty, Zuri rose to embody the triumph of the human spirit, teaching countless others how to transform their own curses into blessings. The villagers of Mwangaza kept her memory alive through ceremonies, songs, and dances that celebrated the journey from pain to power. Mothers would tell their children the story of the kind-hearted girl whose arms cradled snakes that were once feared, but who became a queen through courage and compassion. This tale was not just about survival, it was about embracing the forces of nature and spirit that often seemed dark or dangerous, only to discover their hidden gifts. At the heart of the village stood a shrine dedicated to the doll, the treasured gift from Zuri's mother that had once been buried in the snake pit by the stepmother's spite. Now the doll rested on a carved wooden pedestal, adorned with beads, feathers, and snake scales, bathed in the soft glow of lantern light during evening prayers. It symbolized the transformation of suffering into sanctity, a tangible reminder that even the most painful wounds could birth new life and hope. Visitors to Mwangaza often paused before the shrine, feeling the weight of history and magic in the air. Some whispered prayers to the doll, seeking guidance or healing, while others left offerings, small tokens of gratitude or requests for protection. The shrine became a sacred place of pilgrimage, connecting the living with the legacy of Zuri and the serpents who had guarded her through the darkest times. The stepmother's story also became part of the village's oral tradition, serving as a cautionary tale against jealousy, cruelty, and the dangers of allowing bitterness to poison the heart. While she had once wielded power through fear and manipulation, her downfall was a testament to the fact that true strength arises not from oppression but from empathy and forgiveness. The villagers spoke of her transformation with a mixture of sorrow and hope, recognizing that even those who cause harm could seek redemption if they chose to walk a path of humility and change. Zuri herself lived long enough to witness the fruits of her courage, a community healed and united, where old fears had given way to respect and understanding. She walked among her people, her eyes shining with the quiet power of one who has known both suffering and grace. She taught that strength was not measured by force or dominance but by the ability to nurture, forgive, and embrace the cycles of life in all their complexity. Over time, the presence of snakes near Mwangaza ceased to be a cause for alarm. Instead, every sighting was met with smiles and reverence, a sign that their guardians still watched over the village. Children played near the snake pits without fear, and elders told stories of the night when serpents rose to circle a dancing girl beneath the full moon. The snakes were no longer just creatures of earth and shadow, they were living symbols of protection, wisdom, and the enduring bond between humanity and nature. The legacy of Zuri, the girl who had been forced to sit on thorns but grew a throne, became a beacon for generations to come. Her story inspired countless others to face their own darkness with bravery and compassion, to find power in vulnerability, and to understand that transformation often requires embracing both pain and beauty. As the years turned to decades and the village of Mwangaza flourished beneath the watchful eyes of serpents and the stars, the song of Zuri's life continued to be sung, a melody of hope that carried on the wind, reminding all who heard it that even in the harshest trials, the arms that hold power are those that choose love, forgiveness, and the courage to rise. Thus, the tale ended not with finality but with a promise that the spirit of the Snake Queen would forever be entwined with the heartbeat of Mwangaza, and that every thorn could one day bloom into a throne. Zuri's story spread far beyond the boundaries of Mwangaza, carried on the wind like a timeless song that echoed through valleys, over mountains, and across the vast plains. It became a legend not simply about a girl and her connection to serpents, but a powerful narrative of resilience, love, and the extraordinary strength found in unexpected places. From humble beginnings shadowed by sorrow and cruelty, Zuri rose to embody the triumph of the human spirit, teaching countless others how to transform their pain into power, their fear into faith. Villagers from neighboring lands came to Mwangaza to witness the place where snakes once crawled at the feet of a little girl and bowed to her gentle touch. They came to learn how a child born of kindness and grief could outgrow cruelty and reshape an entire community. Elders would point to the snake pits, now ringed with protective stones and flowering herbs, and say, "There, beneath the earth, slept the first breath of our salvation." No longer were snakes feared or hunted. They were honored, treated as guardians of spirit and soil alike. In the heart of the village stood the shrine of the doll, Zuri's last gift from her mother, once buried out of spite, now revered as a symbol of rebirth. It was encased in glass carved with protective runes, resting on soft serpent skins donated by the snakes themselves during shedding season. Each scale shimmered with hues of green, gold, and silver, glowing faintly under the light of lanterns and the eyes of those who came to pray. For every woman who wept before that shrine, every child who reached toward the doll in wonder, and every traveler who paused to leave a stone or bead at its base, the message was clear. Even what is broken can become sacred. Zuri walked gently among her people, her presence quiet but mighty. Her hands, once small and trembling, were now steady and healing. Children ran to her for stories, eager for the next tale of talking serpents, midnight dances, and the whispers of the earth. Women sought her wisdom, elders nodded to her in respect, and even the wind seemed to change course when she stood still, listening. She did not raise her voice often, but when she spoke, her words carried the weight of generations. The stepmother's tale, once buried in shame, was told too, though never to glorify her cruelty. Rather, it became a lesson stitched into the village's memory, a caution against allowing jealousy to root itself in the heart. The villagers would say, even she who buries beauty must one day face what blossoms. In time, the stepmother, aged and softened by guilt, tended the shrine herself. She swept the earth around the doll, laid fresh flowers beside it, and taught younger women about the perils of envy. Her redemption was not swift, nor easy, but it was real. In the festival season, when the rains had nourished the earth and the moon gleamed high in the sky, the people of Mwangaza gathered beneath the great baobab tree to celebrate Zuri's legacy. Girls danced in circles, their ankles wrapped in beads that clinked like whispers. Boys painted their faces with serpent symbols, and elders led chants to honor the bond between woman and beast, soil and spirit. In the center of the gathering stood Zuri, now old, her silver hair woven with snake scales and feathers, her back straight with pride. One evening, as twilight bathed the village in amber and violet light, Zuri stood at the snake pit once more. Though her legs had grown frail, her eyes remained fierce. Slowly, reverently, she placed a hand upon the earth, feeling the familiar warmth hum beneath her skin. A large serpent emerged, its movements fluid, its tongue flickering in greeting. The two sat there in silence, the old queen and her lifelong companions, listening to the song only the earth could sing. She whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for every child who would one day feel afraid, lost, or unloved. Let them find strength, she prayed, where others only see shame. That night, she passed peacefully in her sleep, the snakes coiled protectively around her bed like a crown of silence. No one wept with despair, for hers was a passing of peace and honor. They called it the night of the silent dance, when even the stars seemed to pause and bow. Her body was laid to rest beneath the baobab tree, surrounded by stones etched with symbols of light, scales, thorns, and open arms. In her honor, the village declared a new tradition. Every girl born in Mwangaza would be given a scale from the sacred pit, a token to remind her of Zuri's strength and the truth that thorns could become thrones. No child would be denied kindness. No girl would ever be silenced again. Over time, the legend of the Snake Queen spread to places Zuri had never seen. Travelers brought her story to distant lands, inspiring those who had known oppression, exile, and pain. In a faraway desert, a girl who had lost her family found courage through the tale. In a coastal village, a boy with a limp spoke of Zuri and the snakes, lifting his chin with new pride. Her story lived and breathed, like the wind, like the soil, like the dance of serpents under moonlight. And still, on quiet nights in Mwangaza, when the air was thick with memory, villagers claimed to hear the rustle of scales in the grass or feel the soft brush of a tail across their ankles. Children giggled instead of screamed, and elders nodded knowingly. She is here, they would say, watching, guiding, holding us in her arms. The doll remained at the shrine, untouched but glowing with an otherworldly presence. Some said they saw its eyes flicker with light. Others swore they heard it hum a lullaby. Whether truth or tale, it didn't matter, for belief had become part of the village's soul. And so, the tale of Zuri did not end with her death. It lived in every girl who stood tall despite the world's thorns. It breathed in every whisper of grass, every slither of scale. It sang through generations, reminding all who heard it that pain can be transformed, that cruelty can be met with courage, and that even a doll buried in darkness can rise again, crowned by love and guarded by serpents. Thus, the story becomes not just Zuri's but ours. A story of thorns and thrones, of dolls and snake pits, of silence that spoke louder than screams, of arms that once held pain but now held power. And when the children of Mwangaza ask, as they always do, did it really happen? The elders smile and say, yes. And it is still happening, every time you choose love over fear. Every time you see a snake and do not strike. Every time you find your voice after silence. For in the village of Mwangaza, they remember her still, not just as a girl, not just as a queen, but as the very spirit of transformation itself.